We are live. Who's taking off?
Okay, great. Well, good evening and welcome to the Los Cien virtual program for October 8th. My name is Pam Chanter, and on behalf of my fellow board of directors for Los Cien and also our program committee, I'd like to welcome you here tonight and hope you enjoy our program. We have a very dynamic panel tonight. Our conversation tonight is about safety of voting, about the power of Latinx votes, and experience of Latino elected officials here in Sonoma County. The Sonoma County Latino scoreboard topics have been something that we have started to bring to you since over a year ago in September, when we brought forward the Latino scoreboard in September. And tonight, our conversation is again from the topics of the scoreboard, which we bring you every month. And one thing I would like to point out, we do apologize for having to cancel our last program. Due to the fires, we had to cancel that program, which was a partnership with Generation H, and we were going to be talking about housing. So we will be bringing that program to you in the future. And tonight, I'd also like to once again thank all of our sponsors. Many of our sponsors for Los Cien have been with us well over 5 years. We also have new sponsors. You saw their names on the screen, and you'll see them again before the evening's out. Thank you so much, sponsors. Without you, we couldn't do these great programs. And if anyone out there would like to be a sponsor, please check in with us on either Facebook or our website, and we would be glad to have you as a sponsor. And now it's my great pleasure to introduce our moderator tonight. Her name is Carrie Puget, and she is a new member of the Los Cien Board of Directors. She is a native of Sebastopol, and she is also working on a regular basis with Leadership Institute programs as the program manager at Daily Acts. Carrie has always wanted to serve the community, and she particularly likes to work with racial equity issues. She helps empower leaders to be civically engaged. And her prior job was also in leadership as well. She served as the Executive Director of Sonoma County Conservation Action. With that, I'd like to welcome Carrie.
Thank you so much, Pam. I'm so honored to be here and so honored for all of our speakers. We have 4 fantastic speakers joining us this evening. And if you are joining and need translation support, I want to make sure that you're aware that we are offering that. There should be a button at the bottom of your screen to be able to get this entire program in Spanish. We're also transmitting live on Facebook, so I encourage you to share with your friends. So tonight we're going to be speaking, we have amazing speakers on the topic of security of our voting process, Latinx voter participation in the 2020 election, and the power of public service and the Latinx vote. As Pam mentioned, we have the Los Cien scorecard, and this is important to recognize this is a pillar of our community, and having political participation and representation is so critical. And with 26 days left before our election, we hope that tonight's panel will give you confidence in our local voting systems and feel empowered to ensure that your vote and voice are heard and very important for the entire process. Our speakers tonight include Deva Marie Proto, Sonoma County Clerk, Recorder, Assessor, Registrar of Voters; Lizette Escobedo, the Director of National Census Program at the National Association of Latino Elected Officials, NALEO, Educational Fund; Councilmember Marta Cruz of the City of Cloverdale; and Vice Mayor Esther Lemus of the Town of Windsor. I'll be introducing each speaker as we transition to them, and I encourage you to ask questions throughout the evening by putting them in the chat, and we'll have time for Q&A at the end of the panel, but please add them throughout the entire evening and we'll circle back to them at the end. To get us started, we're going to look at the security of our local voting process here in Sonoma County so that we can have confidence that your vote will be heard and counted. To do that, we have Deva Marie Proto. She is Sonoma County's Clerk, Record, Assessor, Registrar of Voters. She's been employed with the county since 2007 and in the Clerk, Recorder, Assessor Department since 2009. She grew up in Sonoma County, has a bachelor's degree and a master's in public administration from Sonoma State University. She won the primary election against 2 opponents with over 64% of the vote and took office in January 2019. Since then, she's had to deal with a flood, a fire, and a pandemic, but she's still carving out time to be with us here tonight. Thank you so much. And with that, I'll hand it over to you.
Thank you. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
All right. So this year looks very different in elections. By state law, we're mailing every active registered voter a vote by mail ballot. We also have 20 drop boxes that have been installed around the county that are currently open. And from what I understand, they are receiving a lot of ballots right now. We've added the ability so people can track their ballots. They can get noticed when they're in the mail, when we receive them back in our office. This year, we don't have the traditional polling places. We have 30 in-person voting locations, but unlike previous years, they're open for 4 days. So you can go in and vote in person at any one of those locations, starting on Saturday, October 31st, Sunday, Monday, and then of course, Election Day. Those locations were cited using demographic data, including minority populations, voters whose primary language is other than English, low vote by mail usage in the past, and low access to vehicles, public transportation, population centers. So we've really tried to make sure that everybody has an in-person location that they can easily access. We have information on our website. At every location, we have translation services available for people who don't speak English or maybe don't feel comfortable speaking English. As I mentioned, you can track your ballot. You can also check your ballot status online at any time to make sure that your vote has been received, it's been counted. And this year, we'll also have our results in a map format. So if you're curious after the election to see how everybody voted, how your neighborhood voted, or maybe your district in the city, you can go in and see how people voted on different contests. We have a lot of practice in Sonoma County with voting by mail. Over 82% of our voters permanently vote by mail. So we have everything set up. We know how to track the vote by mail ballots. We know how to get them in, process them. Signatures are checked by humans every time. Our vote tallying system is not connected to the internet, so there's no chances of hacking. We have badge access and 24-hour video surveillance on that. We are working very hard to make sure that everything gets done correctly for this election. Our message right now is vote early. Make sure you can get that ballot in and verify that it's been counted. So I'll be available if there's any questions afterwards.
Great. Thank you so much. And we encourage everybody to add their questions about our voting process here in Sonoma County. And we'll also be able to provide resources on our website afterwards so that you can make sure you have all the information you need to have your vote counted. With that, we're going to look at the national level. And we're very excited to have the Director of National Census Program at NALEO, which is the National Association of Latino Elected Officials, joining us tonight. We have Lizette Escobedo joining to look at the election 2020 and Latino voter participation, looking at some of the trends across the state and where Latino voice has made a notable impact and why it's so incredibly important in our community. We are so honored and excited to have you joining us tonight, Lizette. And with that, we'll let you take it away.
Great, thanks, Carrie. Can you all see my my slides? Are they up?
Not yet. Oh, now we see them.
Okay, great. I'm gonna try to do this as I was mentioning. This is a whole new landscape. We're doing everything digital and sometimes it just fails us. So let me go into presentation mode. I have a lot of great information to share, a lot of national information. I do have some local information as well that I think will be helpful. I will share that as of this Monday, I'm actually now the National Director of Civic Engagement. So we'll just move on to the next topic, but I do handle a lot of census work. A little bit about NALEO. We are a nonpartisan, nonprofit organization. We are a 501c3. We do not advocate for any particular candidate or party. We simply advocate for Latinos to turn out and vote. Aside from doing work around elections and the census, we also do work around naturalization, and we also do a lot of work with elected officials. It's in our name. And so once Latino elected officials get elected, we also put them through our newly institute, through various other trainings to make sure that as they get elected, they become the best leaders that our communities need them to be. We have offices all across the country. I will spare folks kind of going through the different states because I really want to get to the meat of the presentation, and I know my time is limited. But in a sense, Latinos play a very important role. They play an important role not just nationally, as we know there are close to 30 million Latinos that are eligible to vote as of right now. And although it may not seem like a lot when you look at the 233 million U.S. citizens that are eligible to vote, I'm going to talk a little bit about why it matters locally. So as we see here in the last presidential election, even though we had, and this is for 2016, even though we had a little bit less than 29 million Latinos eligible to vote, not all of them voted, right? And so this is particularly our challenge. We had about 12 million Latinos who turned out to vote. And although, you know, at the national level, like I mentioned, we make a dent, right? Because we're close to 20% of the electorate. I also want to talk about the impact at the local and even at the federal level in other ways. But we have a long way to go. As you all see, a big gap here is the difference between eligible and registered. So we have to make sure, especially in the state of California where we still have time, we have to make sure that Latinos are registered to vote because that is the biggest gap. A little bit over 50% of those who are eligible are actually registered. Now here's where we see some impacts. For us, it doesn't just mean the presidential race. It means what are the impacts that our vote had in U.S. Senate seats, in House seats, and in other ways. For example, we had the first Latina elected to the U.S. Senate in Nevada, first Dominican American elected to the U.S. House of Representatives, first Puerto Rican elected in the U.S. House in Florida. And so again, this is a lot of the impact that we see when we increase the participation of Latinos across the country. Now, midterm elections. Midterm, state, and local elections is where we have a huge challenge and we have a long way to go. As you see, midterm elections, your participation drops by 1 million people, and this is across the board, not just for Latinos. But this midterm, we actually had a pretty decent turnout. Now, the biggest challenge that we see is participation in local elections, which is interesting because these are the elections that really impact our communities. These are city council seats, these are school board seats. These are seats that determine whether we get a new library bond or whether we get a new school in our school district. So very important to make sure that we're consistently turning out Latinos because our participation does increase by the type of race it is. However, there were, again, some milestones that we saw in 2018, which was a midterm. We had first 2 Latinas elected to the House in Texas, first Latina in the U.S. House of Representatives in New Mexico, first Latino representative in Ohio, and the youngest person ever elected to Congress also happened to be a Latina. So again, when we look at participation for us as NALEO, we don't just see this is the total that turned out and we just need to do better. We also look at these races where we have a significant impact and where the Latino vote is increasing, as we're seeing in the state of Ohio. Now, California. In California, Latinos play an even bigger role because the share of registered voters in California is close to 30%, which means that as Latinos go, the state goes. We still have a huge gap in terms of those eligible to register and actual turnout. And we see that huge gap again for midterm and local elections, but we play a massive role specifically in this state. Sonoma County. In Sonoma County, Latinos actually make up 18% of everyone who is eligible to vote in the county. And so, again, when we talk about whether it makes sense to invest in Latino communities and to invest in turning them out to vote, It's definitely worth the investment. They are a huge voting block in the county. And again, they will determine a lot of your local races, your county races, and sometimes, again, your municipal races. Now, we had some predictions that we made. We always make these every presidential elections. We do estimate that about 14.6 million Latinos will turn out to vote this election, which is a 15% increase from what we saw in the last presidential election. And so a lot is at stake. If you look at these states, we are growing in terms of share in each of these states. In Arizona, we're now 20%. In Nevada, we're close to 20%. In Texas, we're over 20%. And in California, we're close to 30%. So our vote matters. Turning us out is extremely important, but we have challenges, many challenges, more challenges this time than before. One of the major challenges, as we know, is that Latinos have been one of the communities that have been most devastated and impacted by COVID-19. Based on national surveys that we've been doing every week now for about the past 5 weeks, 33% of those Latino voters that we surveyed said that they knew someone who was affected directly by COVID-19. Now, what does that mean? That means, for example, you have a lot of fear in terms of turning out to the voting locations during early voting and on election day. You have a lot of fear when it comes to going to various locations to register to vote. And then you have a lack of access on places where you traditionally go to register to vote. A lot of our community prefers to get registered through an organization. They prefer to register themselves when they go to the DMV and the post office. A lot of our community did not have access to that this time around. Most of the voter registration that organizations were doing and our community had to opt to was online voter registration. And this is not an area that our community is traditionally, at least our older Latino community, is traditionally savvy in. Voter enthusiasm is down. From our polls, we see that kind of fluctuate. But it's down, again, because we've been hit with so many things, and our community has been impacted and devastated more so than others. In Sonoma County, for example, we have the wildfires. And so registering to vote and voting does not become top of mind. And so that is a major challenge. How do you make it important? How do you make it relevant in the community? Misinformation, disinformation, this is a new monster. This is a new beast that we haven't dealt with in the past. But there is a massive amount of disinformation in terms of how safe is it to vote? How do you vote? When is election day? Based on the surveys that we've done in Latino communities, even though 50% of those that we surveyed said that they would be voting by mail, 33% of the folks that said they'd be voting by mail said they did not have confidence that their vote by mail ballot would be processed correctly. And so there is this huge kind of hurdle that we have to get through in terms of informing our community about how safe it is and how to do it. 29% of the folks that we surveyed said, I have no idea how to do it, but I plan to vote by mail. Voting options are limited. You know, some of the challenges is that elections are run county by county, right? And so it's making sure that our communities are informed of what are the voting options, what do they have to do to prepare. They should, you know, we're reminding folks that they should be voting early to avoid the crowds. But again, not a lot of our community knows when that starts. They don't know that in the state of California, everyone's going to have the option to vote by mail, but there's certain things that you have to do, right? They need your signature has to match. And so informing folks of all their voting options to ensure they can vote safely is a huge challenge that we have this time around that we didn't have during other elections. And I know, and Carrie, feel free to probably have a lot of information, but I want to make sure that I don't go over on time. So feel free to do a time check at any point. In terms of the weekly tracking poll that I mentioned, we want to talk a little bit about trends, right? What we're seeing with Latino voters. I talked about a lot of these already, but as we go in through the weeks and as this narrative and rhetoric around vote by mail not being safe increases, we see a decrease in Latinos that we're surveying on wanting to actually vote by mail. We saw a 9% decrease in terms of our survey of folks who said, my apologies, of folks who said that they would want to vote by mail. So we went from 55% on week 1 that we polled folks to 47% by week 5. So a lot of work around informing folks that they can vote safely and securely. 3 in 10 respondents, again, say that they don't trust the mail-in ballots. A lot of Latino communities don't trust election processes in general, so your voice as leaders, as people in the community, is extremely critical. About 53%, this last poll said that they would be voting in person. And 41% said that they intended to vote early, which is a really good sign. Another good sign is that the majority of the folks that we spoke to on these polls, at least 80%, said that they would be voting this election, which is pretty high on what we've seen before. Now, the issues that matter to Latinos. Obviously, 48% of the folks that we surveyed said that COVID-19 is top of mind, lowering healthcare costs, again, 30%. We've usually seen healthcare be one of the most important issues for Latino communities, but one that is new is racism and discrimination. 27% of the folks that we surveyed said that this was an important issue for them, and interestingly, police reform and Black Lives Matter had a 60% favorability rate amongst Latino communities. So these are new issues that are coming up. We also know, again, that the Latino electorate is fairly young. The median age for Latinos right now is 30, and Latinos under the age of 35 actually make up a little bit over 35% of the total electorate. And so it shows here, right, in the surveys that we're seeing. Voter enthusiasm, like I mentioned, there is an increase. Interestingly, there's been more so of an increase in voter enthusiasm amongst Latino men over Latina women. We don't know why that is. And here you'll also see some information on favorability for the different candidates. We do these every week. These are the ones that have been pretty constant. Again, this is all purely data. This is from the polls that we do. We're happy to share these with folks. But in essence, the enthusiasm of Latino is fluctuating. Latinos want to be informed and want to know that the mail-in process is secure. And we have a lot of work to do in terms of registering Latinos and turning them out to vote at the end of the day. And this is, again, a trend that we see across the board. Now, what are we doing about it? So we are pulling together our voter engagement and voter protection program. We do expect that there might be some issues at the polls. And so for that, we have our national bilingual hotline, which is 1-888-VOTA. In the event that anybody has a question, someone in your family says, hey, I really want to vote. I'm really confused about the process. I really want to vote. I don't know how to verify whether I'm registered, or I went to vote and it was closed, even though the polls said that they were going to close by this time. We like to track a lot of that and figure out how we resolve. And so we do that through our hotline. We're going to be having some national days of activation. And then this slide also serves to remind folks that we now have an extended census timeline. So as folks are thinking about voting and filling out their sample ballot, we also want to make sure that you're thinking about filling out your census, because you now have until October 31st. Here are some tools and resources. I'm just going to skim through these. Again, I talked about our hotline. I talked about we have a voter registration tool online. Vote411.org is a website that we've partnered with for any information, but you do all have a resource that was just on before me. And that's great that folks have a good relationship with your county registrar. That is the best place to go. And then we have tons of research on challenges and what we're seeing in Latino communities. And again, my final pitch, so please make sure to fill out your census. If you haven't done it already, it's really easy. It takes about 5 minutes. You can fill it out online by phone, or wait for an enumerator to knock on your door, or you can mail it back if you haven't done so already. But when we look at elections and we think, geez, I think we should have more folks in our electoral college. The electoral college is actually determined by data that's gathered by the census. So you want more representation in Congress, and you want to make sure that you have a fair electoral college, and you want to make sure that you get part of that 1.5 trillion in funding every year. Fill out your census. And that is it for me. I'll turn it back to you, Terry.
Awesome, Lizette. That was a lot of information in a short amount of time. Thank you so much for packing that all in. It's such important information, and what really stood out for me was you saying that in California, as Latinos go, the state goes. And that is a really powerful sentence. And thing to remember as we make sure the importance of getting out the vote and the massive role that Latinos play, and that 18% of the eligible voters in Sonoma County are Latino, and that can sway an entire election. So that is absolutely fantastic. And we will have those slides available on our website after the event. So those resources that you've provided, that abundance of information, is available for everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. So now we're going to shift to a little bit more local as we look at the power of public service through the lens of our very own Latina elected leaders. We are graciously joined this evening by Councilmember Cruz and Vice Mayor Lemus, who will share some of their experiences running for and being in elected office. According to the Los Cien scorecard of 2018, only 11% of local elected leaders were Latinx. But these two inspiring Latinas are helping spread awareness of how important it is to run for office and share their stories and experiences in doing so. So we're so honored and excited to have you joining us here. Our first speaker, we're going to have Councilmember Marta Cruz. And to introduce Marta, she has an enormous resume, but just picking a little bit of the many accomplishments she's done. She is a native of Puerto Rico who has worked with migrant workers communities since she arrived to the US. Marta graduated from Indiana University with a BA in Liberal Arts and Communications and an MA in Spanish. She earned an MA in Linguistics at the University of Michigan, Ann Arbor, and continues graduate work at the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill. She has been a teacher to school-aged children and a university professor. As a council member, she chairs the City School District Relations Subcommittee and the City Public Works Subcommittee in Cloverdale. She serves on the board of Zero Waste Sonoma and was recently appointed to the Commission on the Status of Women. She is also a member of the Latinos Unidos and works on outreach to the agricultural community. Thank you so much for joining us this evening, Councilmember Cruz, and we'll let you take it away from here.
Thank you very much. It's always an honor to be able to be a voice where there was a vacuum. And now I would like to share, of course, that I arrived in a new community. I saw that there was a need for integration of all members of that community. And also I needed to see the presence of equity in terms of children, youth, the aging. So I got involved in everything that I could in Cloverdale, and I became a voice, I became a presence. People didn't know what to make of me because I didn't look like the typical, Puerto Rican or Mexican. I'm an Afro-Caribbean woman, very proud of that. I just went ahead and served as another member of the community. And this is how we need to see ourselves. And that's how people need to see us too. Not to be the other, but to be part of the whole. Did you have another question?
So much. Oh yeah, would you like to share any of your experiences running for office or your work applying for a local commission and why you joined that?
Well, I've always wanted to be an agent of change and also a voice of inspiration, and to highlight that there's so much richness within the Spanish-speaking community and indigenous languages communities that we share many heritages within one group, that we're very diverse within ourselves. And that was something that I really wanted to bring forth as a message for all constituents. And for people to understand that just because some of us speak Spanish, not all of us speak Spanish, and others bring indigenous traditions and languages with them. And that has to be respected and has to be highlighted. And that's one of the things that the radio station has done. And we're very proud to host KBBF here in Sonoma County.
Wonderful. And can you speak to any obstacles you faced in this process of running for office or being in office, and how you've overcome those?
Well, because I was a newcomer, it was very lonely and difficult. But my commitment to the community and my presence had been noticed. And so it was a mixture of curiosity and also some old-fashioned, what would I say, the bad habits that we still have in the society as a whole, occult racism or implicit bias, patriarchy, in terms of only men can do this, and only people who speak English, or people without an accent, or people who look like me. But the thing is that I didn't find people looking like me representing the interests of the Latino community. So that was kind of a challenge, but I kept meeting people and knocking on doors, and I kept an active website. And so, I just went with a clean and open heart and open mind to try to engage all the community. And I was successful in doing so. I feel very good serving and being a voice, not only for Latino, but for the children and for the elder. Carrie, are you still there?
Yes. Did I cut out?
Yeah.
I'm here. Well, thank you. We have one more question, and then we'll switch to Vice Mayor Lemus. Is there a message you would have for people considering running for office or joining a board or commission?
Well, one of the things is, if you're already in office, please make sure you keep track of all the progress you've brought, all the programs that you brought to your community, all the engagement that you have been in, because people think that being a council member or being in a commission is just going to a monthly meeting and sitting there to say yes or no. People need to understand that it is our job to comply with your desires, your trust, to bring change about, and to look into what has been working and what hasn't. And unfortunately, when we are into that situation, we kind of forget as constituents that some people have not done their job. So it's when you become the bad person because you have to increase the water, or you have to put something on the ballot, or you have to keep a project that benefits the majority versus someone who's been complaining forever. So those are challenges, and those are problems that people need to keep in the back of their mind as they're planning to run. And if they're going to run, they need to run as a qualified individual, as a qualified person, and as a woman and a Latino later, even though those two groups are truly underrepresented when it comes to a local and county level. I kept saying to Esther, please come to the county meetings, because I'm the only person of color there. And, we need to start making a change. I am proud to say that I have inspired many people, and especially in my town now, in Cloverdale. There are 4 Latinos running for office. And if I did nothing else, I think, and I'm hoping that I was an inspiration for them. And, I've supported many Latinos and many other persons of color in the county, because it's not just being a voice, but joining to become a voice for our communities. So that's what people need to take into account, and not to give up, even if they have to do it alone, to do it. I had to do it alone. I did a good job. Keep at it. Don't give up.
That is a fantastic message, Marta, and such an inspiration with such a strong track record with so many people already inspired to run. So thank you for sharing some of your story. And now we're going to move over to our incredible Vice Mayor Esther Lemus, who equally has a resume that is very long, but to read just a snapshot of all of her accomplishments. She was elected to the Windsor Town Council in November 2018, placing first in a crowded field of 10 candidates. She currently serves as the Vice Mayor of Windsor. She previously served as a Windsor School Board trustee beginning in 2015 and is currently employed as a Deputy District Attorney with the Sonoma County District Attorney's Office, where she has served as a prosecutor since 2007, after having previously served as a federal prosecutor for the United States Department of Justice at the U.S. Attorney's offices in Northern and Southern Districts of California. Esther was born and raised in Santa Rosa and moved to Windsor with her parents while in high school. Thank you so much for joining us to share some of your story, and I'll hand it over to you.
Thank you so much. And I just want to start by thanking Los Cien for inviting us to be here tonight. I recognize this is a very important election, and I'm really glad that you guys decided to present on this topic, because we really need to encourage people to get out there and to vote. It really matters every time, but it's especially important this time. So I'm going to go ahead and start by going through some of the questions that were emailed to me. And the first one was, why did I run for office? So as Carrie mentioned, I previously served on the Windsor School Board. And I want to start by saying that I never thought I would run for office, never. Yeah, if you had asked me this years ago, it was like the furthest thing from my mind. But really what happened was that there was a closure of a school in Santa Rosa. And it was something that really worked me up, because I really felt as an observer that immigrant families didn't really have advocacy for themselves and for their children. And so I was having a conversation with my sister, and I told her, I'm so upset about that. I should just move to Santa Rosa and run for school board. And lo and behold, my sister happens to tell me, well, actually, I understand a seat has just opened up on the Windsor School Board. Maybe you should apply. So of course I did, and ended up getting appointed to the Windsor School Board. And that was such an eye-opening experience for me. Just realizing really the power of the decision-making process, really the influence that you have in that position over priorities, at least in that case, with respect to a school district, and also your decision-making authority over funding priorities. That was very eye-opening for me. Also seeing how important it was to have diversity represented on the school board, and having diversity in the lens in which you do your work. And so, so it was a combination of that experience, really seeing throughout my community the lack of diversity in elected positions and in leadership positions and upper management positions. I took a look at our council and here in Windsor, and I realized, like, wow, all men, one woman, not a single person of color. I looked at the commission appointments and the council's in charge of making those appointments. Same thing, no diversity, mostly men, very few women. And I realized, well, I guess if you want to see things changed, then you have to put yourself in there and make those changes yourself sometimes. So that was really what motivated me to run, among many other reasons. And of course, I put in the hard work, and I was so grateful, and I'm so incredibly grateful today to serve in this role as a councilwoman and currently as vice mayor. So obviously I was very grateful for the result. What was it like to campaign? Well, it was certainly, when I was on the school board, I actually was appointed, but I had to, after 2 years, I had to run the last 2 years of the seat, which again was my first taste of running for office, because I had never planned to run for office. So I ended up running. I did have an opponent, and that was really my opportunity to jump right in and get that practice of campaigning and running for office, which I did. It was a learning experience, and I was able to retain my seat for school board. Running for council was a little bit different. It was a much more competitive race. When I first ran, I thought my understanding, or what I had heard, was that two incumbents were going to run. There was going to be an open seat. And so I decided to run for that open seat. Lo and behold, the third incumbent decides to run. So now we have 3 incumbents running for 3 seats. And at the end of the day, we have 10 candidates running in a very crowded and very competitive field. It was certainly an exciting time. I'm not going to lie and say it wasn't hard work. It was a lot of work. There's a lot of pressure when you're running for office. There can be criticism from people who've never met you, people who don't know you, who make assumptions about you, and sometimes you see all these comments on social media, so you do your best to ignore that, especially when people are commenting who have never had a single conversation with you. Let's see, some of the obstacles that I faced initially in that city council race was I did have a candidate try to convince me not to run at the very beginning. Tried to encourage me to, well, why don't you hold off and run in the next race? Once I actually announced my candidacy and filed my papers, then I had another candidate try to convince me to drop out of the race because apparently there was some concern that I might actually unseat an incumbent. So really, I think what I took out of that was the questions that I asked was, well, how long do you wait? When people are telling you, wait your turn, you can sit around waiting forever, right? One thing that I realized is that sometimes there's also entitlement. People think they have more right to run for a position than you. And so I had to really, find the strength within myself to say, no, it's my time, it's my turn, and I'm going to run. Sure enough, I ran, and I'm really grateful that I ended up being successful in that race. Let's see. Now, what obstacles did I face? Well, I think I've shared some of those. I will say, though, that just generally that there are some obstacles for females running for office. I can just explain some situation or some examples of being around, in a conversation with, quite honestly, like a long-sitting elected official, standing there with a group of males and having this elected official ask all the males, so when are you going to run? When are you running? When are you running for office, right? And not a single question coming to me about when I'm running for office. So unfortunately, there is some gender bias, and it's something that we have to really push through, and we have to encourage women, people of color. We need to encourage people of diverse backgrounds to run for office. So those were some of the obstacles that I faced. How did I overcome them? Really, a lot of it was just really a strong self-will, really having to encourage myself to, you know what, you need to step forward and you're going to do this because your voice is needed. Also the realization that, some of my observations just in life, in the workplace, has been that sometimes if you sit around waiting for your turn never comes. And that's true oftentimes because there are biases in terms of who gets the opportunities, who gets the promotional opportunities, and who advances in the workplace. So it was part of it was those realizations that if I don't take control here, no one's going to hand it to me. So I have to put myself out there to put myself in this position to make these decisions, and just to be able to be in this decision-making capacity. Let's see, what other challenges? I would say another challenge is stereotypes. I have found along the way that sometimes people do stereotype me as a Latina candidate. They make assumptions about where I will stand on certain issues. They make assumptions about your political leanings. And again, the Latino population, we're a very diverse community. And you can't put us all in one box, because depending on the issue, I tend to legislate or make my decisions keeping a very open mind on all issues. And so that has been another obstacle just generally, at least on the campaign trail, is that people making certain assumptions about who you are and where you will stand on the issues. What's an example of the impact you've had as an elected official? I will say, first of all, I want to say that it has been really the greatest honor having been elected. And to this day, I'm so incredibly grateful to all the Windsor residents who were there to vote for me and allowed me to serve in this role. It's also been an incredible honor to serve as a councilwoman. In this position, I know Marta understands that, we really have a lot of issues and a lot of decisions that we have to make. Some examples of some of the impact that I've made, and I'll just list a few, but, we've approved funds for affordable housing for veterans. We have settled land disputes for property owners. I know one thing that I've been big on with Windsor is that I have been I've played a big role in making sure that the information that we get out to our residents are bilingual. When I first joined the council, everything was in English. And that was true even in kind of urgent situations. And so at my urging and my constant reminding, now we are in a regular practice of getting everything out in English and Spanish. Another accomplishment, something that I'm very proud of, is that, with the Black Lives Matter movement, every city in Sonoma County, every city agreed that we would review our policing policies and practices. And just yesterday, Windsor made the decision to increase our implicit bias trainings for Windsor Police Department police officers. They previously had these implicit bias trainings every 5 years, and now we are requiring that these trainings take place every year. So to me, that's a big accomplishment, something I'm very proud of. And again, these are just some examples of some of the impact that I have had personally, along with my council members. What is the message that I have for people that are considering running for office? If you haven't made the decision to run, and if you're interested, first question is what's stopping you? And if not now, then when? I would encourage you to reach out to people who have run for office, pick their brain, get some advice on how they ran and how they were successful in their runs. Definitely very important to build a team to support you. An example I can give you is that when I decided to run for city council, I had a friend who had previously run for city council. And he knew what a big job it was on top of holding a regular job. And in my case, also having a family and serving on the school board at the same time. But he told me, Esther, he said, I know what it is to be a candidate for council. He said, you're gonna be working around the clock. And so then he offered, he said, I will be your treasurer. He said, so you don't have to worry about that. He said, it's your job to be out there, to be campaigning. And so again, I give that as an example that you have to build a team. You have to build a team to support you, because running for office is a big job. It's a full-time job. And honestly, it can be exhausting. But it's certainly something that's worth the time. It's worth the effort. It's very rewarding. And if you're interested in running for office, I would highly encourage you to do so. So thank you so much. I'm happy to answer questions, or if anyone wants to contact me later, I'm happy to meet and speak with anyone later. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. That was an incredible wealth of wisdom and insights, Vice Mayor Lemus. So we really appreciate that. And we are getting flooded with questions, which is fantastic for all of our speakers. But we're going to stick with you and Councilmember Cruz for your question before we go to some of the other questions. And this is in particular to a question from Naomi asking about our community who are immigrants and cannot vote. How can they make change? And if it's possible to answer in Spanish, that would be wonderful.
Muy bien. Todo el mundo puede contribuir, aunque no pueda votar. Una de las cosas es hacerse presente y darse a conocer con las personas que han sido electas. Por ejemplo, en Cloverdale yo tengo personas que no pueden votar, pero sin embargo conocen el trabajo que yo hago y los servicios que yo puedo ayudar a proveer. Por tanto, si no saben quiénes son sus concejales, vayan a donde ellos, porque están dispuestos a trabajar con ustedes. Y también pueden ayudar por poner un rótulo en su casa, en su ventana, en su patio. ¿verdad? Asistir a los diferentes eventos para apoyar a las personas. Y hoy día no se puede apoyar en persona verdaderamente, pues hágalo en línea, aprenda cómo, busque quien le ayude. Okay, what I'm saying is you could help by putting a sign on your window, your lawn, supporting everybody who's running, attend their events virtually, learn how to. And if you don't know the council person, go to the council person. Let them know who you are, what your needs are, so that we can know what services to provide. And even though you may not have the citizenship and you cannot vote, you're still a member of society. Usted todavía es un miembro de la sociedad. Sus hijos van a la escuela y pueden ser parte de los grupos de padres, además, para apoyar a sus estudiantes. Cualquier queja, venga donde mí. Ya sea aunque no viva en Cloverdale. Yo les ayudo.
Muchísimas gracias. We're going to move to the next question, and we're going to do rapid fire on this. We've got a lot of questions, so that was perfect. If Vice Mayor Lemus, you could answer the next one in 45 seconds or so.
Okay, rapid fire.
Ready? Do you believe the cost and resources of running for office are outweighed by your impact of being an elected official?
The answer is no, it's absolutely not outweighed. The impact of being an elected official is great. And I can't even begin to explain all the ways in which you're making a big impact. And I actually want to mention one very important way, and that is that young children are watching you, and they're seeing that, yes, it is possible for them, regardless of their skin color, regardless of their gender, to be in an elected position. So that is probably one of the biggest impacts and something that I take great pride in. But aside from that, which is incredibly important, you're making very big, important decisions. And it's absolutely worth the time and the resources and the commitment that it takes to get there. So I highly, highly encourage it.
That is a clear message, loud and clear, so thank you. We're going to transition to next questions for Lizette. Do you consider the Latino vote as a single block, or is it divided?
Well, as folks were talking about earlier, Latino voters are not monolithic voters. We don't vote on one issue. We don't vote for one party. We don't even vote on candidates because of their surname. So I think when we talk about Latino voters, while it is considered a voting block, right, because that's how we describe it, we need to look more deeply and comprehensively on what are our trends, what are our values. We vote differently in every state. We vote differently sometimes in every county. And so it's very important to not assume that because, someone's going to talk about immigration, we're all going to vote for that candidate, or because that candidate speaks Spanish in a rally, we're all going to vote for that candidate. We're a little bit more complex than that. So I think it's important to understand the nuances. It's important to understand the issues that matter. A lot of times, when they say, hey, well, this candidate spoke on immigration, so you all are good, right? And it's like, no, we care about all the other issues as well. We want what all Americans want, which is access to healthcare, affordable healthcare, education, and some of the issues I talked about here. So yes, we're one voting block, but we are not a monolith, and I think folks have to do more to understand this.
Awesome. One more question. Why do you think we are seeing a decline on Latinos' preference to vote by mail?
In this specific election, I think it's no secret that we've been seeing a lot of very public figures talk about how it's not secure and safe. And so as you see that narrative increase, you see the trend of their interest in voting by mail decrease as well. However, there are more Latinos who have said that will vote by mail this election than any other election. So our part, what we have to do is educate them on the fact that the process is safe and secure, how to do it, and making sure that their vote will be counted. So again, a lot of the information will be critical, but we have to combat a lot of the disinformation and misinformation that is out there around mail-in voting.
Wonderful, and Deva is doing a fantastic job doing that here in Sonoma County. So we have one more question for you, and then we'll switch. Your slide showed 4 million potential Latino voters in California. what would you consider a successful percentage for Latino turnout?
You know, I think the big challenge, and my apologies because I can't remember what projection it was for California. Our projections are pretty conservative for the most part, and so, you know, I think what we have to look at for turnout for every single election is what are some of the impacts that we were able to make locally. What was the turnout in some of the counties as well, and in some of the cities? The big challenge here is also looking at, you know, how many Latinos actually registered in this election, especially in a state like California, where our potential is close to 30% of the total electorate, but not, we're not even near that when it comes to registration. So we still have a lot of work to go with registration. And so the closer we can get from eligible to registration, that means a bigger impact that we can have for actual turnout on election. Well, no, not on election day, because now the last day to vote is election day, but in the voting process overall.
Awesome. Thank you for answering all those questions very quickly. And we're going to go just a little over time because we have such an abundance of questions. We want to make sure everybody is very confident in our voting process. So to talk about that, we have a question for Deva. So how can we keep track of our mail, voting by mail, to make sure it's counted?
So you can sign up right now to track your ballot. That's at where'smyballot.sos.ca.gov. And it's kind of like FedEx or Amazon. You'll get a text message or an email while the ballot's in transit, when we get it back in our office, if we decide to count it, and if there's any issues with it. You can also check your vote by mail status, the status of your ballot on the Secretary of State's website, and that's updated in real time.
Awesome. Who can be a poll observer, and what is the process?
Anybody is allowed to observe the poll working process. It is the election's a public event. Because of COVID this year, we're going to be asking that people sign in at the polling places, wear an observer name badge, and maintain this physical distancing and wear masks at all times.
Awesome. Do we still need Spanish-speaking volunteers to work the polls on election day?
I think we have people assigned at this point in time, but quite frankly, I am always looking for more bilingual speakers. And so you can email rov-polls, P-O-L-L-S, at sonoma-county.org if you want to be put on the list.
Great. Will polling places have COVID standards in place?
Yes, so we tried to get larger locations for this election so that we could do more social distancing. All the booths will be 6 feet apart. We're trying to make sure that we have some plexiglass barriers, some controls in place just to limit touching and the amount of time that people are spending together. So we're very cognizant and concerned about it this year.
Fantastic. And last question. Does the Registrar's office have any evidence of voter fraud with mail-in ballots?
No, we have not seen that. I think the closest we've gotten is we have a couple of people of a certain age, perhaps, that forget, they'll mail their ballot in the beginning and they'll forget that they sent that. And then they will come in person and try to vote, and we'll have to inform them that no, we couldn't count your ballot because you already cast one in this election. But for the most part, we have not seen any issues.
Fantastic. Well, that brings us to the end of our program. Thank you everybody so much for giving your time with us this evening. Some really powerful stories and messages. What really stood out for me is that you have every right to run and to not wait for your turn, but to make it your turn and just jump in. And that Latinos can sway an entire election. So we have a very secure voting process, safe from COVID standards, and your vote is incredibly important. So our call to action to leave with you tonight is to make sure you vote. If you can't vote, get out and volunteer, put up signs, everything that Marta said. You can still sway a lot of votes, even if you yourself can't vote. Get your friends to vote, family, neighbors. The census is still open, so make sure everybody is filling that out as well. And encourage you to check out, if you're not quite ready to run for office, you can look at all of the boards and commissions that are open in the county and start to dip your feet in there. So we encourage you to get very civically engaged. Your voice is absolutely critical to the future of our community. And the future of Los Cien is really grateful for all of you to join us tonight. We have a few more programs coming up in the next couple weeks. We really encourage you to attend. On the 22nd of October, we have Staying Alive, Real Cost Measures of Living in Sonoma County with the United Way, which is going to be an incredible presentation of the cost of living in California with really fresh data and important information to know as a community. We also will be doing a post-election wrap-up, what just happened, on the 5th of November, so join us for that. And the Color of Law has been rescheduled with Generation Housing on the forgotten history of how our government segregated America and housing. And that's November 11th as well. So encourage you to check out our website for those events coming up. Definitely encourage you to get involved civically at every scale and to make sure to vote. And I just want to have one offer for Marta. I see your hand. Do you have a closing comment?
Yes, if you haven't registered, October 19th is the deadline. Please register, please vote.
She said it better than I could have. Thank you, and tantas gracias para todo esta noche. Thank you, everybody, for being here. We look forward to seeing the Latino vote percentage and turnout just skyrocket this election, and more people running every year. So with that, tantas gracias, and have a wonderful night.